What's going on, guys? Today's video is going to cover my favorite passive income streams based on ROI, feasibility or like barrier to entry, and then leverage and scalability, and the ability to build on this business long term instead of just setting it up and then hoping it works. So these are all based on my personal experiences. Now, a lot of people will try to tell you their favorite way of creating passive income based on like book knowledge or what seems good on paper. I'm going to talk about specifically my favorite income streams and passive income streams that I have personal experience with, in hopes of it giving you maybe a different perspective or maybe a better idea of what options are available to you and ones that you can explore. So just a caveat, like I'm not a personal finance expert. I'm not a financial advisor. I'm just an enthusiast with all things personal finance and helping people on their way to financial freedom, because I'm currently on the path as well. And I'm hoping that this can help a couple people along the way to get there that much faster. So we'll get right into it. So we're going to rank this based on ROI, feasibility, and then leverage or scale. So really just overall, like what are, and then I'll score it at the end to give you an idea of each specific passive income stream, and you can decide for yourself based on the points that I covered. So first one, Amazon FBA. Now you've probably heard of this. It's really just, I mean, I would hope you've heard of this by now. It's really just the ability to grab something from like wholesale or retail stores like Walmart or Sam's Club or Costco or some kind of retail store, listing it online. You can go to Goodwill, sell books for a pretty hefty profit. I've made some insane returns from time to time. I get a book for 50, 75 cents and sell it for $400. That is definitely not the norm. That's a pretty rare occurrence, but it does happen. Definitely a grind. I think this is the most, to me, the most grind-worthy business model, but the people that really do well, treat it like a business and they have systems in place. So there's a couple ways you can do it. You can do it retail arbitrage, online arbitrage. That's like manually sourcing through all the deals on a consistent basis, like scanning hundreds or thousands of items every couple days at Walmart or Target or TJ Maxx or Marshalls, places where you're going to find some decent deals. Goodwill typically is like the most common, or thrift stores specifically for books is where I would go. This is definitely one of my favorite options when I was first getting started into this like business owner entrepreneurship passive income stream. Now looking back, if I were to do it again, I might consider it, maybe for the book genre, but it's very, very saturated, or more saturated than it definitely was 4 or 5 years ago. Preferably wholesaling on Amazon makes the most sense, because you can buy items in dozens or hundreds or thousands of quantities at a time, getting a specific discount based on the quantity that you order, and then sell it for a profit. So at one point I had a product that I was selling for like 30% margin. It was really good. And then after a while, other competitors came in, and eventually Amazon came in and started competing, and there's no way you can beat Amazon on price. They're going to get it way cheaper than you ever can. So that sucked, and I had gotten out of that product. I was probably selling it for 6 to 8 months. I was making, at one point in Q4, I was making $10,000 a month on that product. It was really good, but again, as all things come to an end, it was good while it lasted. But that would be my preference if you have a lot of capital to be able to get into the business, maybe 3, 5, 8 grand to deploy. It's worth considering, but I wouldn't say it's my favorite business model. So ranking it, ROI, I'm going to give it a 3.4 out of 10. Scalability is a 6.8 out of 10, and feasibility is a 5.5 out of 10. So the overall score is a 15.7 out of 30. And the reason behind the ROI, it's just you're spending a ton of time looking for deals, and after all is said and done, your margins are maybe going to be 15 to 30% on the high side. You're very lucky if you're getting a 40% return or more. If you have like a private label product that's specifically yours, you can set the margins. You can get some pretty good deals, but it is the most grind worthy part of it. And as you get bigger, yeah, you can get like warehouses and employees and stuff like that. I never really got into it. I mean, it wasn't like a massive time investment, but it's definitely one of the more time intensive businesses that I have come across in this industry, from a time invested to a return on your money, personally, like personal preference. So the next one is stocks and crypto. So before you roll your eyes, hear me out. So I can't say that this is like my favorite option for creating passive income, but it is definitely one of the best for if you have especially a large income from your job or what you're doing currently, and you're just looking for a hands-off way to invest your money. I think it is a really good option to be able to sit back and just let the money come in on a consistent basis. So now it's not something that I would consider like a high ROI, because to me, what I'm calculating for ROI is more based on the return of your money. So if you put something in, what are you expecting to get back out of it? Now it's consistent, it's very reliable that you should get like 8 to 10% annualized returns if you do an index fund investment, which is my preference. Other than that, you're really just gambling, and I can't say that that's like a reliable income stream that you should bet on, unless you have, again, these index funds or like target date funds where it matures at a certain date. I can't say it's my favorite for like money making passive income, because you do need to sell whatever you put in. So over time, if you have 6 figures invested, and people do the 4% withdrawal rate based on their financial independence number. Not to get too into the weeds on that, but let's say you need $2.5 million invested and you withdraw 4% of that every single year, and that will give you your amount that you can live off of every single year or every month. That's an option that people do, but the problem is when you do sell, you get taxed at that. So it's like, to me, I would rather not need to sell anything and still live off of that income on a consistent basis, and that would be my passive income role. That's me personally. Crypto is great for just massive gains, but also huge losses. So it's way more of a gamble than traditional stocks, because you're not buying into Facebook or Google or these tried and true businesses. It's more of just like, big wins, and it might go up, it might go down, who knows. So for me personally, I'm seeing this as an ROI of 4.7 out of 10, feasibility at a 9.4, and then a scalability of 5.2. So the ROI not being so high just because it's reliable, but it's not something that you can make like 40% returns on your money. It's going to be a consistent 8 to 10% annualized return over the past 10 years, or since the beginning of index funds, it's consistently 8 to 10%. Now this year it's doing pretty well. I believe it's like 15 to 20% annualized over the past 365 days, which is great, but that's not always the case. You can get hit with an immediate drop in 20% or 30% within a couple weeks, and that definitely sucks if you're banking on that for retirement. Feasibility is awesome because you can just put it into Robinhood or Vanguard or one of these brokerage platforms. You can buy the stock very easily, which is amazing. And I think for a lot of people, that is a great way to create some passive income, is just log in, not worry about it, just buy it and sit back and relax. Same thing with 401ks and IRAs. Very easy to just invest into it and sit back and chill a little bit. Now the scalability is hard because there's not really any leverage involved unless you're considering compound growth, which you can argue that that's a part of stock investing that makes it so powerful. But there's other businesses on here that allow for leverage and compound growth just as much, if not more. So, over 10 years or 20 years, that consistent 8 to 10% return from 100,000 versus a million is wildly different in terms of like how much your potential growth will go, because you start compounding the returns in 10% on $150,000 versus $100,000. It starts to snowball. So that's why people like it so much. But for me, I can't say that stocks or crypto are like a big portfolio percentage of my portfolio personally. I like to have a little bit more control over how the performance of the asset can do based on a few factors, which I'll cover in a second. Now, that being said, the total score for that is 19.3 out of 30. It's okay. I can't say it's like the most reliable as far as like building a massive wealth portfolio, but I think for people that make a ton of money, that's a very good option, just to set it and forget it, not really do much with it kind of thing. And I think it's tried and true on that sense, but there's other ways to make, for me, a considerably higher amount of money. The next one is social media. Now, this might, you guys might give me some backlash on this one, but hear me out. So personally, the ROI on it is about 6.8. The feasibility is a 10, and the scalability is an 8.1. So I'll explain why. So I have a blog, a YouTube channel, other accounts like TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram, and I've created some digital assets on other business platforms like an ebook or a book, some affiliate links, and all sorts of like advertisements. So the reason being, over time, you will start to see outsized returns and value that comes back to you the more content that you put out. That's not a surprise. So you might look at a content creator and they talk about over the past 5 years, they started making $1 a day, and then $10 a day, and then $100, and then $10,000 a day. Now, is that the norm? Not always, but the people that stick it out, it does do very well for them. And the beautiful thing is there's not really any maintenance required for past videos. So to me, social media makes a ton of sense for people that really want to create an online presence. But the really interesting thing is the fact that you have so much leverage with social media. So I'll explain what I mean. So Cody Sanchez and Alex Hormozi and Conor McGregor and other celebrities that are out there right now, like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, they've all created social media brand presence. And they might already had a past image, and then they come into social media and then create a business around that, like Logan Paul with Prime. So you think about that, you look at them as a celebrity, they already did very well, but they made more money through their brand and their product than they ever did in their career. Like Kylie Jenner, for example, they're making, their businesses are valued at over $1 billion based on just the revenue, and some of them have only been operating their business for a year or two, or maybe call it 4 years. But the thing is, they're not really doing any of the day-to-day operations. They've got a team that's doing all of that for them, but their brand name is so big now that they're able to scale extremely quickly. Think about Mr. Beast. He makes more from social media and his business than really anything else that you could possibly do now. He's at such a large scale that he puts out a video and it gets 100 million views. The advertisement revenue alone is more than some people make in multiple years of working, which is crazy. He made $250,000 on Twitter revenue, and he posted it in like less than a week's time. And that's insane. So that's not always the case, of course. There's 99% of the population doesn't have that kind of reach. But for the ROI perspective, the fact that you can put out a video, one video, call it a YouTube video, you can cut it up into shorts on YouTube Shorts, Instagram Reels, Facebook, and TikTok, and that also spreads on those platforms. You all link back to a funnel or some kind of ask or offer, affiliate links, or some kind of email list that you're sending out. It allows you to take that viewer, easy math, call it 1,000 people coming into a funnel. They all get hit with email sequences. Over time, that those 1,000 contacts or leads starts filtering down. You might get 1 to 5% conversion into a product or some kind of offer that you've built up, and you're consistently recurring revenue of maybe $10 to $100 per lead. It adds up pretty well, and you don't have to think about those kind of things anymore. Once you've already posted the video, you either do it yourself, you have a team go through and start splicing up these videos and all this content to where you've got one video that turns into 20 or 50 pieces of content that you can use in other ways. Think of Gary Vaynerchuk. He posts a podcast, and then his team will go through and create, dozens or hundreds of pieces of content around that. So I think the ROI is huge. The feasibility is a 10, because anybody can record a video really quick and post it on a social media account. Anybody can do that, and it doesn't cost anything. And then the beautiful thing is, over time, like I said, the more you get recognized, the faster your account grows. Same thing with compound growth. You hit 100 subscribers on YouTube, very quickly those 100 people are starting to share your content. You get to 500 faster than you got to 100. You get to 1,000 faster than you got to 5, and then you get to 10,000 subscribers faster than you got to 1,000. There is a matter of compound growth that happens on social media, and as a result, the revenue that you built behind your brand starts to grow exponentially because of that. So I'm going to give social media a 24.9 out of 10 out of 30. Geez Louise, 24.9 out of 30 on that overall scale. Number 4 is vending machines. So I like vending machines specifically because the ROI is amazing. It's not as high as some of these others. As far as the ROI overall, I would give it an 8.2 out of 10. Now, I'll explain my reasoning for all of this. The feasibility is a 6.8, and the scalability and leverage is a 7.4. So the ROI is quite high because it's historically a 50% return on your money. So you get a Snickers bar for $1, you sell it for $2. After all costs are associated with the product and the credit card fees, the taxes, the insurance, everything accounted for, labor, you're at 50% margins, which is ridiculous. So you put a vending machine into a high-rise luxury apartment that you will make $1,000 a month. I've seen that time and time again. I have had a couple locations. I've since sold my vending machine business, but I had a couple locations pulling between $1,000 to $1,200 a month. Now with micro markets being a thing, you can make $2,000, $4,000. I've seen people make $6,000 or $12,000 a month from one location, and average margins is 50%. Pulling $6,000 profit from a location that you're going to maybe 2 or 3 times a week, not too bad. So the feasibility, a little bit lower, 6.8. That's mainly because it's the time required to go restock. Not everyone has a car. There's a couple more costs that are associated with it, and you can't just restock it out of thin air. You either have a team that does it or you do it yourself, and the time required outside of working hours a little bit tougher. But you're restocking candy bars into a machine, so it's not the end of the world. And if someone doesn't get their Snickers, if they're out of stock for a couple days, it's not like it's the end of the world. They can buy a Three Musketeers or a Milky Way. So there's supplementary options that they can have. But the scalability is really nice. I like it personally because I've had multiple situations where I got in the door with the location, I went live with it. 3 months later, they asked if I could go and put my machines into another building. And just like that, you go from 1 locations to 2 or 3. And I've had people that I've chatted with where they had their machines in 1 building, and that company managed 11 other buildings. And just like that, they got 12 locations. And that level of scalability is insane. And not to mention that it's a year-round desire or need where everyone always needs food or drinks, and that's not going away anytime soon unless we have some way to continuously refresh or refuel without actually needing to eat. Then vending won't go anywhere. So that was a really nice business model. I think it's very feasible for a lot of people if you have a means of transportation and if you have the ability to spend like an hour to an hour and a half per location per week. It's kind of like the average of what you would expect. So definitely feasible for a lot of people. I definitely would recommend it. But my favorite revenue stream or passive income stream by far is real estate. Definitely the most long-term potential here. I'll explain why. So ROI, I'm going to give it an 8.8. I'm going to give the feasibility a 7.2 and the scalability or leverage a 9.4. So ROI, I'm going to give it an 8.8. If you do it right, specifically, it's very high. It's not as high as other industries. You can't make like, essentially 100% return like you can in digital marketing, or like a 90% return. But there are some overhead costs associated with it. But not to get too into the weeds, but if you do a cash out refinance and pull all of your money out, technically you're at an infinite return because you have no cash in the deal. But not everyone does that. But just thinking from a prospect of like putting a tenant in place and the time involved to keep up with it, especially if you have a property manager in place, pretty freaking high. And in most cases, like what we do is what's called house hacking. So you can get in the door, you can purchase a property for 3.5 to 5% down. That's what we've done twice now. Our first property we got at the time in like 2019, we put $7,000 down, and we got almost a $200,000 asset. And with the one we have right now was almost $400,000 asset, and we paid 5% down. So 20 grand for an asset that's worth an astronomically higher amount. That's, to me, it makes complete sense. And then we also listed on Airbnb and offset our housing expense almost by 50%. And that's huge. I personally think it's a great option for people that are really trying to build wealth long term. And I can't really say that we lift our finger a lot to like manage this. So for example, our basement is rented out on Airbnb. Every month or 3 months we go in and clean it once, and then we rent it out again. So just literally are making money while we sleep. And yeah, there might be a repair here and there, but our management is very little. And our property in Texas, out of state, we have a property manager who oversees it for us. And I mean, I might manage it or check in once every couple weeks if something needs to be repaired, which is the cost of doing business. But to me, the ROI is amazing because you can put such little capital down and get such a valuable asset, especially as an owner occupied loan. A little bit different if you're doing an investor property at 20% down, but that different argument for a different day. I think the feasibility is not the highest, but it is high enough because of owner occupied loans. You can definitely leverage a first time home buyer or a loan that you use because you're living there. Now, if you're doing an investor loan, different category, because 20% down on a $200,000, $400,000, $600,000 property, definitely a different scenario. But for the vast majority of people, you can very likely come up with 3.5% down on the purchase price. So I think that's more than feasible for a lot of people. And the fact that especially if you live with roommates or rent out a garage apartment or the basement or other rooms in the house, you can offset your living expense almost entirely, and you're building wealth in the process. So I think, to me, I personally believe that real estate is one of the, if not the best passive income stream that you can have, because you also get tax benefits and a lot of other things that come with it. Won't get into on this call, but by far the scalability and leverage of real estate is what makes it so powerful. And that's why I like it so much, because where else can you put 3.5 or 5 or 10 or 20% down on a property and get something worth exponentially more? Now, in the beginning, stocks might make more sense, but as you look on a larger time horizon, real estate makes complete sense, because even if you don't have to buy a property every year, but maybe every other year for 10 years, if you get 5 properties and they're all acquired for less than 20% down, you've put yourself in a really interesting position, assuming you buy good properties. You're not just buying anything, but you buy it in a smart way. I mean, the opportunity for growth is incredible. And especially if you start leveraging your equity, which is what we did for our previous house, our first house that we got. We pulled out $67,000 for a HELOC and used that for a down payment on this house. I mean, technically, we didn't pay anything out of pocket for the house. We didn't use any of our personal cash to buy this property. We used equity that we got from our other house and used that to acquire our current primary residence, and we paid 5% down for that. We have since paid off that loan, but technically we used the equity from our other house to acquire this property, therefore using the leverage of real estate to build wealth even more. And if we ever wanted to do a 1031 exchange on that other house and essentially upgrade to a bigger asset, we can. And that's the power of real estate. Not to get too into the weeds there, but the total score for real estate to me is a 25.4 out of 30. I personally believe that it's the best asset that you can own for wealth and like long-term income generation. And the nice thing is you don't have to sell anything along the way to create monthly cash flows. You're getting paid every month, unlike stocks where the only time you really get paid is when you have a liquidity event or sell. So to me, getting paid every single month, you're building wealth in the time that you own it. You have tax advantages, and also you're building that equity in the long term. To me, real estate makes the most sense. But I hope that you like this. If you did like it, please subscribe or like and comment. And check out my page, financialfreedomandme.com. That's where I have my formal blog that covers all of this material. But I would highly recommend checking out the description below for all other ways to get in touch. I have a lot of resources that I've put out that I would really recommend you checking out, so you can learn a little bit more about me, my backstory, who I am, what we're doing. But I appreciate you watching. God bless, and stay tuned.